Hello, everyone. An injury to one is an injury to all. What's this got to do with prioritizing public education in Oakland? Well, it has everything to do. The Oakland Unified School District has unleashed a union-busting campaign. It's outright union-busting. They're calling for rewriting all labor contracts, the teachers' contract, the SEIU contract, the AFSCME contract, to try to finish off the privatization of Oakland public education that was really pushed very far by the state takeover, which the state controlled the Oakland Unified School District from January 1st, 2003 to June 30th, 2009. The state came in at the request of State Superintendent of Public Instruction Jack O'Connell and Oakland Mayor, well, the state came in, at the behest of Don Parada, who represented us then, who wrote the legislation, SB 39, Senate Bill 39, which enabled the takeover. Parada was then the president of the state Senate. That authorized the takeover. But Jack O'Connell, the superintendent of public instruction, newly elected, and Jerry Brown, then mayor of Oakland, called on a man named Eli Broad to name the state administrator who would have dictatorial power in Oakland. Eli Broad is a Los Angeles billionaire, and his Broad Foundation for Education, along with the Gates Foundation, with which they work closely, is at the center of the corporate agenda for education, what he calls the business model and privatization. Charter schools, downsizing, increasing standardized tests, teaching to the test, and union busting. How did they come upon Eli Broad, and why did they choose him? Well, for one thing, Eli Broad is a long ally of Jack O'Connell and Jerry Brown. In the 2002 campaign for State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Eli Broad, together with two of his close colleagues and allies, John Doerr, who is the leading venture capitalist in the Silicon Valley. He was Mr. Dot-com boom, and after that was the venture capitalist who funded Google initially. And Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, the founder of Aspire Charter Schools, and then the president of the California School Board. Together, Hastings, Doerr, and Broad contributed more than $500,000 to O'Connell's campaign. Usually, in past campaigns, contributions were on the order of $50,000. In other words, they bought the election for O'Connell. He turned around and handed the Oakland Unified School District to Eli Broad and his minions. Broad appointed Randy Ward, who was then going through the Broad Urban Superintendent's Academy, having previously been the superintendent of schools in Compton. Ward was the superintendent for 3 years, from 2003 to 2006. He was followed by Kim Statham, who had gotten into a scandal back in Washington, D.C. suburbs in Maryland, and had her career revived by bringing her out to Oakland for a year, recycled her, sent her back to Washington, D.C., and in came Vince Matthews, who had, and all three of them went through the Broad Urban Superintendent's Academy. Matthews had been the principal of the for-profit Edison Charter School in San Francisco when it was in a huge battle with the community and the school board in around 2000, 2001, 2002. He then became the vice president of West Coast operations for the for-profit Edison. What happened when the Broad Foundation took over the Oakland Unified School District? Well, actually, I think that I actually have written that up in something that I just written, which I'd rather read from. So the Oakland Unified School District was used as a laboratory. The district had a $37 million deficit. That was the alleged reason for taking it over. The school board was stripped of all power. All power was put in the hands initially of Randy Ward, the state administrator, followed by Statham and Matthews. Ward immediately instituted a 4% across-the-board pay cut to all employees. He laid off well, I think about 40% of custodians laid off security guards, laid off clerical workers, food service workers. He outsourced much of this work to private companies, to private vendors. He closed school libraries in almost all middle schools and in some high schools, including at Castlemont High School, where I worked throughout the state takeover. Now, state education code requires that every school, every secondary school, that includes middle schools and high schools, have a library and a credentialed librarian. The libraries were closed. The librarians were laid off under the state control, under the downsizing. Meanwhile, charter schools increased. They went from, I think, about 8 charter schools to 32 in 2009 when the state takeover ended. The number of charter school students increased from 2,000 to 8,000. At the same time, the number of students in OUSD overall went from 55,000 to between 37,000 and 38,000. 1/3 of students in the public schools were gone. Meanwhile, charter schools quadrupled. Oakland, about 18% of Oakland students are in charter schools today. That is close to double that of any other urban school district in California. About 18% right now. It's going up because, as I'll talk about, 5 schools are being closed. If they succeed, that's going to lead to a decline in enrollment for sure. And they're approving new charters for more charter schools. They'll be over 20% soon. And they have 25 more schools on the agenda for closing the next 2 years, but I'll get to that soon. So, not only did they close the school libraries and lay off the librarians, a violation of the state education code, which is the law, they either reconstituted or shut down nearly half of all public schools in the district. They shut down many, and then they reconstituted. That is, they either broke them up and dispersed the faculty and staffs, or they put them under a new administration. At Castlemont High School, where I taught, and I see Bill Balderston is up there, and he was there for longer than I was. At Castlemont, they took a school of 1,750 students. They broke it into 3 small schools against the vote of the school site council, against the wishes of the teachers, staff, and community. School site council said, we will not fund these schools. They had control of discretionary funding, which is about half of all funding. The schools couldn't have operated without that funding. Randy Ward said, I'm not 100% behind this, I'm 1,000% behind this. And flouted state law, and because he was the state appointee, was able to get to it. Unfortunately, the California Teachers Association legal department would not challenge that. So Castlemont was broken into 3 small schools. But in addition, they brought a charter school onto the campus. To get the charter school on the campus, they emptied one of the buildings. They closed down the vocational academies, which were the Construction Academy, which was woodshop, the Culinary Academy, which was cooking, and the Fashion Academy, which was sewing and beautician. They trained a very large number of us students for jobs which were hard to get in the East Oakland community. Those were shut down. Their building was converted into classrooms, and a full school building, what's called the 100 building of Castlemont, was turned over to a charter school. This was a plan by Broad and Company that could not have been done. They couldn't have gotten that charter school on without creating space. State law allows charter schools to claim space in public schools that is not being used. So they created that. So that's just, these are just some of the examples of what went on under the state takeover. They imposed scripted learning geared to high-stakes tests and brought in consultants and managers from around the country who knew nothing about education, cared nothing really about teaching, were just there to implement a program of high-stakes testing, increase the number of high-stakes tests, scripted learning, teach to the test, not by accident. The Broad Foundation was officially partnered with the U.S. Department of Education around the testing aspects of No Child Left Behind, the first private entity to partner with the Department of Education in that way. Local control was completely taken away from the people of Oakland. Their elected representatives, the school board, now had only advisory power. Often you would go to a school board meeting and you would find only Randy Ward there, and the vote would be 1-0. But if the school board was there and they didn't like what he had to say, it was 1-0 anyway. Now, by 2009, when the state returned governance to the school board, enrollment was down to 38,000, as I said. The cuts and downsizing notwithstanding, the district's debt tripled under the state takeover. Now remember, the state was brought in because Oakland was running the $37 million deficit. They were brought in to put the finances in shape, and they put them in shape their way. What they did was to triple the debt to about $110 million when they left and the year after they left. How did that happen? If they were downsizing, laying off, closing libraries, shutting down elective programs. How did this happen? Well, it happened because they were handing out contracts to their friends, bringing in high-paid consultants and contractors, and also bringing them in as paid administrators for the district. So, by 2009, when they left, Oakland had twice the average dollar value of outsourced contracts for its size of any school, of the average school district in California. Double the outsourcing and double the administrative overhead, double the administrative pay. And many of these administrators were brought in from as Broad residents and trainees. They went after junior executives, MBA graduates, and brought them in and put them in executive administrative positions. They put military officers, colonels, admirals, and so on, and higher executives in charge of school districts. So we had the three I mentioned, Ward, Statham, and Matthews, put here. There was an admiral put in Los Angeles. Dallas, Dallas, Seattle, Portland, New York, Chicago, Arnie Duncan, Detroit, St. Louis, Oklahoma City, Tulsa. We can go around the country and start naming the major urban cities, and most of them have had top administration trained by the Broad Foundation. They trained over 400 former officers and corporate executives for those positions. That comes from the former recruiter for them, the executive who went into business for herself and proudly advertises it on her website. Now, although local control was returned, the battering has continued. OEA has been without a contract for more than 3 years. It's getting on to 4 years. It's been since June 30th of 2008. Teachers work under terms imposed by the school district. The district imposed its terms in June of 2010. The district increased class size and enforced low pay. The OEA contract included class size limits which were overridden when the district imposed terms. Oakland teacher salaries remain the lowest in the county. They're 20% below the averages for the county and for the state for public school teachers. It's about $12,000 a year less. And that brings us to the current juncture. So what's the current juncture? As we all know, there's a war going on in this country waged by the 1% against the 99%, which has devastated urban communities across the country. The Oakland Unified School District was a laboratory. It was being privatized and downsized before they brought the full program of austerity and shared sacrifice fully to bear all around the country. Today, schools, jobs, healthcare, housing, libraries, pensions, programs for the poor, the elderly, and the handicapped are all under assault. Politicians of both major parties insist that the working class must pay for this mess. 3 years ago, when the housing bubble burst and the Wall Street banks cried, "We're too big to fail," the Federal Reserve Bank and the U.S. Treasury Department bailed them out with $16 trillion in loans and loan guarantees. $2 trillion of that is yet to be repaid. They took the money, which they got at essentially zero interest, and put it in Treasury bonds and Treasury bills so that we are paying them again. We're paying them back for the money that we gave them. They're holding our money, and we're paying them for the privilege of doing that. Then the banks transformed in this way their private debt into public debt. They threw it on our back, and that together with the out-of-control military spending of more than $500 billion a year is why we're in the fix that we're in. But they blame it on us and demand that we pay it off. They point to the debt. They say there's no money, no schools, services and jobs have to go. They call this shared sacrifice. But they're not sacrificing. They got bailed out. We got sold out. And now they want to take away everything we have. Tony Smith and the Oakland School Board take the state cuts to public education funding as given. There's a lot of very sincere-sounding rhetoric coming from Mr. Smith. But what he's really saying is, sorry, not enough money. And this is the justification for shutting down the adult education program, which as recently as 2 years ago had 25,000 students, most of them low-income former high school dropouts trying to turn their lives around, or recent immigrants who depended on adult education to learn English. It's their explanation for laying off nearly all school maintenance workers, electricians, carpenters, etc. Last I knew, they had barely a dozen for the entire 100 schools in Oakland. And anyone who teaches in Oakland knows that quite frequently classrooms don't have heat in the winter, and those that do, usually it's about 90 degrees. It's their reason for continuing to pay Oakland teachers less than any other Alameda school district, and it's why they've increased class size, libraries, and eliminated electives. Rather than challenge the priorities, Smith and the school board look for a scapegoat. They play divide and conquer. They blame veteran teachers and the teachers union, and they broadcast this message to the community, and especially to new teachers. And too often, new teachers are overwhelmed initially, and they think that their principal and the district managers put student learning first and are on their side and turn to them. They set school against school, closing public schools, replacing them with charter schools. But closing down public education in favor of charter schools and chasing out veteran teachers can't be done without undermining school worker unions, especially the teachers' union. That's what they're trying to do now. So this is about money, it's about control, and it's about union busting, all aimed at shutting down public education. Tony Smith and the Oakland School Board are executing the program of the bankers and corporate billionaires. Now, they're using sleight of hand to try to sell this program, working overtime to convince the Oakland community that they really care about Oakland students and schools. They propagate their message that their main concern is student learning. They insist that class size doesn't really matter, that a disproportionate number of veteran teachers are bad teachers, and closing schools is really an opportunity to right-size schools, and that school workers' unions, especially the OEA, get in the way of delivering quality education to Oakland students. That although Oakland already has doubled the percentage of students in charter schools, it's okay to keep right on approving more charter schools and closing more public schools. Now, I'm not exaggerating. I was on the OEA bargaining team for 4 years until I retired. I was on until June. And what I'm telling you here is what they would say casually across the table. You know, this is them. I have to say something else, which is that for them to say that teachers are responsible for the achievement gap is the height of obscenity. What's responsible for the lack of real, authentic student learning? That's not a mystery. This has been known for at least half a century. Since the Coleman Report was published in the 1960s, it was known before then, which is it's poverty and social inequality. That's known overwhelmingly. The out-of-school factors are twice as important as the in-school factors. This has been established repeatedly. And of out-of-school factors, almost all are poverty or poverty-related factors. This doesn't mean that nothing can be done. Much can be done, not their way, but much can be done, but you can't change the overall problem without dealing with the overall problem. We're not going to eliminate the achievement gap without eliminating social inequality. Where does it come from? This is a question of class and it's a question of race. That is, it's a question of this social system. Capitalism imposes it. The people who run this, the billionaires, the corporate billionaires, Broad, Gates, Walton, Fisher. Broad, Gates, Walton, Fisher et al. Okay, these are the very masters of industry and the corporate world and the society who control the priorities. They set the priorities of the society. They decide how resources are allocated, where jobs go, which jobs are going out of the country, and when. Then they turn around and they blame it on us. Just like we're being blamed for the $16 trillion bailout, so they blame the achievement gap on us when the real fundamental problem at root is poverty. And furthermore, it's more than two-thirds, actually, because it's not just the in-school factors that are affected. How about class size, resources? These are well known that in affluent areas, you have smaller class size, you have better resources, you have better conditions, newer schools. It's an open and shut argument if you look at it. They don't want us to look at it. Instead, they say, no excuses. No excuses? What's the excuse for the growing social inequality? What's the excuse for bailing out the bank? What's the excuse for the class war that they have launched on us? The no excuses is sleight of hand. It's part of their divide and conquer. Their claims are all bogus. We sat in bargaining and listened to them for years tell us class size doesn't matter. Don't raise that, we'll wipe you out. But in the event, they, when confronted with the facts, they said, oh, well, we guess class size is important, but it's not as important as the teacher effect. Yes, that's right. It's not as important as the teacher effect. They're both the two most important in-school factors. What do you do about the teacher effect? Why? You improve that by chasing out veteran teachers. Well, what is seen among teachers to be the key factor in student learning? It's teacher experience. It's experienced teachers. It's people who teach at least 5 years. They're chasing veteran teachers out. What about the new teachers they're bringing in? Some of them are very bright, dedicated, and can become great teachers, but most of them are gone in 2 years because they're from Teach for America and the New Teacher Project, and they sign up for 2-year stints and leave. Dedicated ones sometimes, not that often, stay a third year. So consequently, in a very unstable situation, you have increased instability. Schools are anchors to the community. Veteran teachers are anchors to the community. Again, anyone who teaches knows. I'll try to finish pretty soon, Steve. Anyone who knows that students come back. At Castlemont, students would come back who I hadn't seen in years, and they would look around the school, and they'd say, Mr. Gerson, where is everybody? There's no one here that was here when we were here. Now, these weren't people who were going to the school in 1600 or 1733. They're people who graduated in 2004, 2005, 2006. They couldn't find any teachers except for me and maybe one other in that small school. And I should say, by the way, I forgot to add before, I said there were 1,750 students in Castlemont in 2003, 2004, last year as a comprehensive high school. I think that there were 700, 650 this year. Less, okay. So that gives you an idea. And by the way, Fremont and McClymonds, similar. Okay. Now, This is, by the way, not news. I want to read a quote from Wayne Johnson, who was the president of the California Teachers Association back 10 years ago or so. American education is in crisis. It's a crisis of poverty. It's a crisis of underfunding. It's a crisis of poor kids not getting what they need. It is a crisis of administrative mismanagement. It is a crisis of huge teacher shortage. At the same time, the U.S. and California rank so low in educational funding and the serious problems that face the children of our public schools, right-wing advocacy groups and corporate leaders are demanding educational reform. They say our schools are failing, teachers are failing. Most of the reforms they advocate have nothing to do with the problems that face our schools. They only advocate reforming teachers and teacher contracts. I call it the phony reforms. To reform a public school system that is underfunded, overcrowded, and running out of teachers, the pundits are demanding more teacher accountability, more testing, more punishment for kids and teachers in low-performing or priority schools. As one of these advocates of phony reform, the Los Angeles billionaire Eli Burrow told me in a one-on-one hour-and-a-half meeting about 3 weeks ago that public education needed merit pay and teacher transfer and seniority rights should be eliminated from teacher union contracts. He calls this progressive unionism. I call it sellout. Secretary of Education Rod Page and Mr. Broad are proposing this concept of progressive unionism, and the NEA and AFT have endorsed the plan. This is union and teacher bashing, not educational reform. That's from 2001. Now, what happened? What was going on at the same time? But then, this is from a book called The Assault on Public Education, edited by William Watkins, and I'm reading from Chapter 5, which I wrote, on teacher unions. But the national AFT and NEA leaderships did not confront this new wave of phony reforms, opting instead to maintain a seat at the table. Several of the most influential teacher union officials found common ground with parts of the corporate program. Randy Weingarten, then president of the New York City Teachers Union, United Federation of Teachers, and now president of the AFT nationally, and Adam Urbanski, president of the Rochester Federation of Teachers and AFT national vice president, were among the 12 faculty members for the inaugural year of Eli Broad's Urban Superintendent's Academy, class of 2002. Graduated Randy Ward, Kim Statham, Vince Matthews, the Oakland State Administrators. Their faculty colleagues included outspoken architects of the corporate reform agenda, U.S. Secretary of Education Rod Page, Fordham Institute President Chester Finn, Center for Reform of School Systems founder Don McAdams, Education Trust Principal Partner Paul Ruiz, and others. They took joint responsibility. They had made a deal 10 years earlier in which they said, under hammering from the Business Roundtable, which laid the basis for No Child Left Behind, we will take responsibility, we'll buy into taking responsibility for student achievement in exchange for local autonomy. They didn't fully consummate the deal then, but Weingarten and Dennis Van Rokel, the NEA president, now are completely on board that judging on Bill Gates' paid $350 million teacher effectiveness program in which teachers will be evaluated, judged, hired, and fired based on student test scores. Now, in Oakland, if you listen to what I read from Wayne Johnson and then what I just said about local autonomy, what's happening now in Oakland is a group of principals has circulated an 11-point program. Point number one, sentence number one, is immediately rewrite all labor contracts. That's a covert document which we have found and put out on our lists, but this is something that has been bought into by the school board and by the superintendent. 2 days ago, Sandre Swanson had a legislative hearing, and Tony Smith told that hearing that a major problem for education in Oakland, we can't move forward and improve student education without rewriting all labor contracts, especially the teacher contract. School board member Jamoki Hodge said something very similar at the December 14th school board meeting when she said, when they presented their new mutual matching scheme, in short, it would end seniority and allow the district to fire veteran teachers almost at will. Should their school close, or should they be consolidated because student enrollment went down? Jamoki Hodge said, well, isn't this going to require rewriting all labor contracts? She didn't say that challengingly. She said it hopefully. Now, this is union busting. We have to be clear about it. It doesn't have to succeed. We can fight this. Parents are organizing against this. Parents at the 5 elementary schools that they're closing, and the Concerned Parents Against School Closures. The OEA is organizing against it. I have flyers which I'll distribute. OEA is taking the lead in organizing a welcome for Michelle Rhee, who is one of the leading advocates of the corporate agenda, a former Teach for America teacher who became the chancellor of schools in Washington, D.C., and you've probably heard about many of the toxic things she's done. I won't go into it. She's speaking February 8th, 7th, and there's going to be a welcome for her. I'll distribute the flyers. And then there's the Occupy movement. Several different groupings in Occupy Oakland are taking up education and are taking up the theme of the OEA bank campaign, which is demanding bailout schools and social services, not banks, and end foreclosures. OEA had 5 demonstrations last year, ending with a demonstration and a sit-in at the downtown Oakland branch at 12th and Broadway, in which 7 of us were arrested. On March 1st, Occupy the Hood, the Occupy Oakland Education Committee, and others are going to be organizing several bank actions and marches, throughout Oakland. There is growing sentiment saying we've had enough and we have to fight it. But in order to fight it, we have to organize. We have to organize to repudiate the state debt, which they thrust on us. They tripled it and now demand we pay it off. We have to demand what we need. We have to demand real, authentic education. Education that begins by saying, how do we nurture the natural curiosity and creativity that everybody has, and particularly students? And how do we fight what they want? What is their program? Their program is for obedience. Think of the way that they talk about classroom management and discipline, about the standardized testings. It's to teach students, particularly students of color, students in low-income areas, is to teach them to obey, to get ready for jobs, flipping burgers, jobs in the military, and if you won't, you're out in the street, you're in jail, or you're dead. Now, that's a pretty stark choice, but now they're bringing it to everybody. They want to wind the society down. Well, that's what all these cuts, that's what the austerity and the union busting is about. And we can fight them, we can beat them. We have them backing up now. They're on the defensive. They're afraid of what we're doing. We have to carry it through. Thank you.